Like a bolt from the blue, it's time for another card review. Hi everyone, I'm a Myriad, and we are going to be reviewing Chizue Silver Hilt today, the new promo card announced, or rather released today. You can, of course, pick this card up for free by playing Eternal and just winning that one little like story campaign as it starts. So yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about this. Last week we covered Blade Storm, a card that specifically only really works if you have units with weapons on it. And one of the things that I talked about was that while the card is really interesting as an efficient option if you have a lot of weapons, there aren't a lot of cards that just incidentally play weapons in the format. Chizue Silver Hilt is something that actually adds to that number of cards, and in a pretty big way. So it's fairly important for considering whether or not Bladestorm is going to be worth it, and considering the I would say prevalence of Rakano aggro sort of coming back into the expedition meta. I think most likely as an answer to like slower Feln and Archenport decks. I think this potentially has a little bit of play to it. So, yeah, 3 cost 3/2. When one of your other units wielding weapon dies, you draw a card, summon, play a +1 weapon, aka a Shingani Mark, with Overwhelm on one of your units. It says Chizue Weapon Master on the campaign like play art, but the actual name of the card is Silver Hilt, which I think is, a nice little like change up, but definitely worth it to note at the very least. Okay, so this card has a counter, or rather like a mirror option to Oni Quartermaster, where it is a 2/2 that says whenever your weapons die, draw a card, and effectively gives it Entomb, draw a card, instead of your common, like when you play a unit on a weapon, draw a card. This is a worse effect in general, but Chizue makes up for it by A, playing a weapon immediately, B, having slightly more stats than the Oni Quartermaster, and C, just working in tandem with the Oni Quartermaster such that it is fairly difficult to like kill one or the other without at least incurring some card advantage on the general setup. So if you're playing in like Throne, or I don't even remember if Quartermaster is in Expedition, but if you're playing with like Quartermaster, you can kind of now build a more weapon focused deck that focuses again around like the very small 1 to 0 cost weapons, of which there are quite a few now. We have, I think, one in almost every color. There is Gold Plated Revolver in green, Hamlet Axe in time. There's, of course, the standard Heavy Axe and Shingani Marks, and there's also Spiked Helm and in blue Bearguard Bayonet. I can't remember if Shadow's got one. Jack's Knife, which, yeah, so there's definitely some options, I think, everywhere for like cheap, simple weapons if you want to play like an interesting little throne deck. Overall, I wouldn't say that that's going to be an insanely powerful throne deck, but it is going to be a fun little value engine that should be easy to play and also cheap to build, which is always nice to add into the mix. Now, is this card good in Expedition? A 3/2 for 3 is like a reasonable stat line for a red unit right now. Red doesn't have a lot of good units in the format as far as things go, so like actually getting into a situation where you can like just play something that's even like mildly efficient, and this card is, 3/2 worth of stats with an additional +1 on something else. The Overwhelm tends to be relevant, and with the amount of different cards that like actually care about having weapons, some of the stuff that I can think of is Riva, Praxis Adept, Inferno Phoenix. There are a lot of things that like really can do a lot with just a single small bonus and Overwhelm, so like there's a lot of interesting things to go ahead and put the card on. However, where the card obviously clearly shines is in Rakano, specifically as a pairing with Bladestorm. You get to play a bunch of weapons on your own stuff. You generally play like much more efficient units in green. Like green just has access to a lot of high health units that carry weapons really well. It has access to good Aegis units, and it has access to good lifesteal units, whereas most of red's units are going to have like 1 health, not be very sort of livable, and will mostly be things that you are like sacrificing. Even so, like if you're playing this on like a Sensari Brigand or an Inferno Phoenix, you're basically guaranteed that the Inferno Phoenix is going to die before Chizue does, so at least you're going to get that card back and get some good bonuses on top of that. I really like that aspect of it. I think the card overall doesn't give a huge amount of presence in the course of the game, but in combination with a lot of like what Rakano's already got going on for it, it's got a really good charge unit at 2. It's got some really, really good Warcry units, including one that I think gets quick draw and double damage. And a bunch of other like useful tools that can make something like this giving overwhelm like be a pretty significant benefit. On top of that, there's a lot of different ways to generate like just basically very big units or units that have particular on-hit effects. Some of the ones that I think are particularly interesting are Furious Magnaventress, which can frequently be like attacking as like an 11-16 or something like that. Or not an 11-16, but like attacking with like 11 power just because you have a significant amount of extra armor. 11-12 would be the correct number. It can also do pretty well with something that needs to trigger an on-hit, something along the lines of Parliament Elder, which I think is one of the more popular green cards at the moment. There's a lot of like different things that can sort of benefit from that small weapon. And then on top of those units benefiting from the small weapon, Chizue is pretty likely to trade with something in the early game. She's not going to trade up with any like 4 drops or 5 drops generally. Like most of what you can do with that is just like not going to really be good trades. Like there's a lot of 4/4s, there's a lot of 5/5s. There are very few units that like will just immediately trade on the ground with Chizue, but combining the fact that she will probably counter out or at least block some kind of 2-drop, on top of the fact that she's buffing up something else of yours, a flyer, a small like Warcry unit or a quick draw unit, then like those two things together do build out into, I think, what I would consider a tempo advantage for 3. So Chizue seems pretty playable. Like, on top of that, with the general, like, invulnerability she's offering to other units, Chizue basically demands that you kill her first. If you don't like Wrath the board, I mean, even if you Wrath the board, then you're still going to get the card draw, I believe, off of Chizue. So it's important to actually like remove Chizue first and then deal with the other problems. And while that is something that a lot of decks are really well equipped to do, it does mean that like there's a little bit of a delay, and you're not dealing necessarily with the thing that is providing the most tempo, while this card is providing you with card advantage. And if you do it the other way around, then you get a lot of card advantage out of those units dying first, and then Chizue dies, which is not quite as bad a situation, I think, because you're able to refresh the board pretty quickly when you're drawing a lot of cards like that. So the main problem, I think, in Expedition is still like a lack of general weapons. Like Granite Acolyte is sort of one of your go-tos. There's a couple of like decent things that you can be playing. Green has Mantle of Justice, which I think is particularly strong. And there's like a few like decent choices that are like gonna be okay. But overall, it is still fairly hard to like trigger a Blade Storm, even with Chizue Silver held out. Regardless, I think the card does support a weapon archetype pretty well, and like with the amount of weapons we got going on, we're likely to see her either in popular Rakano decks right now, or in popular Rakano decks in a future set. I would say specifically, it seems fairly likely that if she's not going to be a big hitter right now, that when the meta swaps over. Oh, I don't actually know if we're gonna do a mid-range swap where like the draft packs change and what's in the packs changes, but like typically there is like a mid-pack or mid-set swap where the overall meta changes a little bit and what's legal changes, and that's something that like could improve Chizue's odds quite a lot if there's like the addition of stuff like Ornate Katana and other like cheaper, simple weapons. Chizue also does pair really well with Display of Passion, which is a card that isn't seeing a lot of play right now, but is more likely to see some now that the card is actually out. So yeah, overall, I'd give this card like a solid B. I think it's pretty okay in design. It's a nice little pairing with Oni Quartermaster. It's got a lot of good things going on with it. And in Expedition, it seems like something that's going to be a mild role player, but not something that's completely broken or like doing anything super crazy. The +1 weapon is a pretty minor benefit, and the Entomb ability is easy to work around. But the card still does present enough tempo challenge and enough of like a general issue as a unit playing weapons that I think it's going to be pretty okay overall in the format. And okay may not be good enough to like make like top 10 master, but it is something that you can definitely use to grind up to the higher levels and build some really good Rakano decks that are fairly reliable. And in pairing with Blade Storm, this card seems like it increases in power level a pretty significant amount. Or is it Blade Break? I thought it was Blade Storm, but now I'm not sure. But yeah, in pairing with the Rakano promo card from last week, it is definitely possible to Blade Smash. That's what it was. Blade Smash. It's possible now to like actually get the kind of benefits that you want out of it. So yeah, that's my review. I think it's a pretty good card overall. It's got decent design chops. It's reasonably powerful, but overall, it's not like gonna be horribly broken, and it's not gonna be like anything where it's just absolutely knocking your socks off. I think that's fine. I think it's good to have. I mean, most of your designs you actually want to land in this spot in terms of power level, because if everything's kind of broken, then it gets very weird. But yeah, this is a card that, like, depending on what nerfs are seen in the next balance patch and what buffs are seen in the next balance patch, could potentially be like a big contender. So yeah, look out for it. It's definitely worth picking up at the very least. You can build a lot of cool decks with it. It's a lot of fun to play with. And yeah, let me know how you feel about it in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. We'll be back with more Eternal Brews and card reviews very, very soon. See you next time.